about this case.
Joining us now for legal analysis is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Noel DeBoard. Also with us, criminal trial attorney and certified firearms instructor Corey Strolla. Great to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be back, John.
All right, so the question is, was the shooting justified? According to a 2007 Texas law, individuals don't need to retreat if they are defending their own lives or personal property. They only need to prove that they had a legal right to be present during the act of defense. This is commonly referred to as a stand your ground law. Corey, do you think the grand jury will come down on the side of not the robber, the shooter, the patron here in this case? What do you think?
It's going to be fact specific. I think, as everyone can see in the video, and thank God there's a video, based on my experience and training, I think up until the first volley of shots into the robber, I don't think they're going to have a bill or they're going to come back with charges. I think where this gentleman may get in trouble is once that imminent threat is over, the robber's on the ground without his gun, and then if he allegedly on video walks over and empties 4 or 5 more shots in the back of his head, that may be a little bit more of a gray area.
That's an important note, Corey. Nicole, another note in all of this is after the patron does this, he left the scene. So some are saying if he had stood by, maybe, gave his side that night, there wouldn't be so much, curiosity or maybe, questions about this. Where do you think this stands with the grand jury? Do they just have to go through the process? Will he be let out, or could he be charged with this?
So in this jurisdiction, it is absolutely typical for any case involving a death, shooting death especially, to go before a grand jury. So there is nothing different about this circumstance that just because they're taking it into the grand jury. That is very standard. And I think that the gentleman who saved all of the patrons in the restaurant by discharging his weapon is well within the bounds of the law. He was absolutely not required to stay on the scene. There is no Texas law requiring that he do so. The ironic thing is if you're in a car and you get into a traffic accident, there is a law in Texas saying you need to stay and stick around at the scene of the accident. There is no such law in regard to a shooting. And the other thing I would add is that I think that this gentleman shot until the threat was neutralized and then stopped. I've had the advantage of seeing the video even after what is typically played and it is stopped so that the people don't have to see what all has happened here. But the gentleman hits the floor, or I use the term gentleman, the robber hits the floor and is still in possession of the firearm. The threat has not been neutralized at that point until the firearm is removed from the robber's reach, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that will be his criminal defense attorney's argument there, diffuse the situation.
Now, as a gun owner, too, you think about this, too. You don't want to put your life, your fate in the hands of a grand jury. Corey, based on your training, you want to make sure you do everything. If you feel like you're in a position where you need to defend yourself, you want to make sure you do everything the right way. What advice would you give to this guy or anyone else? I mean, there's no law in Texas that requires you to stay on the scene, but what would you advise folks to do if they find themselves in a similar situation?
I can tell you, as a national certified fire instructor, I tell my students, I tell everyone in classes I train in, is you stay on scene and you call the police and tell them why you discharged your weapon, and then immediately have them speak to your attorney. And in this case, I agree. There was no duty to retreat or stay on scene, but once that threat is down, the law looks at imminency of that threat. So again, when you have the robber down, is he moving? Was he not moving? Was he still talking? Those are all facts that the grand jury will consider to determine if there was still an imminent threat of bodily harm.
You have this court of public opinion playing out. We heard from the mother saying, my son served time. Obviously she's making the plea here, but that video seems like it will be a crucial piece of evidence as well, Nicole, for this grand jury to see what the actions were by this perpetrator.
That's absolutely correct. And, I think that what they'll be looking for is exactly what everyone's been talking about, and is, did the shooting need to continue? And, this guy was robbing the taqueria, and all of the customers felt that their lives were in danger because he was displaying what appeared to be a firearm. And the gentleman who ultimately neutralized the threat by shooting the man who had the gun had the right to continue shooting and shooting and shooting until that threat was neutralized. And having seen the video myself all the way through to the last shot, it appears that that is exactly what he did.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's just the prosecutor and the grand jury. There's no defense attorney in there. You wonder how this will be played. Again, we'll be watching very closely. And thank you both for your legal analysis on this fascinating and tragic story out of Texas. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Joe.